Justice in our world is not exactly a common phenomenon, though certain individuals do manage to defend the truth and bring about positive changes. However, it's important to remember, when one person defeats the system and changes it, dozens of others fall victim to systemic failures. On August 15, 1958, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, United States of America, Laurie Bembenek was born. Her parents were raising two other daughters, both older than Laurie. The family lived in a neighborhood whose natural beauty couldn't help but captivate. Laurie deeply appreciated the landscapes of her homeland, finding in them a source of creative inspiration. After graduating from the local school, the girl was already demonstrating artistic talent, creating wonderful paintings. Seeking to improve her artistic skills, she chose a field related to fashion and design, and enrolled at Bryant Stratton College. This educational institution was located a considerable distance from her parents' home. However, Laurie's enthusiasm was so great that she moved to Virginia without hesitation. After 2 years of study, the girl earned an associate degree and decided to return to Milwaukee. At that point, her main goal was to build a professional career. It was during this time that Laurie transformed into a true beauty. She took pleasure in using her good looks, enjoying the attention of those around her. At the same time, arrogance was foreign to her. Those who knew Laurie well characterized her as a person with a kind heart and high empathy. After returning from college, for a while the girl worked in the modeling business, participating in photo shoots for periodicals and calendars. Eventually, her life priorities began to change. Laurie's father had served in the police force for many years but left the law enforcement system due to the corruption schemes that prevailed there. He didn't want to be associated with these violations and stated he was ready to return only under the condition of radical changes, and until then took up carpentry. His daughter decided to demonstrate that transformation of the system was possible and that one shouldn't submit to circumstances, so she set a goal to become a police officer. The police precinct was predominantly staffed by men, and her father immediately expressed the opinion that this was an unfortunate choice. For the 20-year-old girl, this professional path was not easy. Significant obstacles appeared, and Laurie's aspirations met with powerful resistance. During that historical period, the presence of women in police ranks was a rare phenomenon, and male colleagues actively hindered this. But Laurie wasn't one of those who retreat in the face of difficulties. The first trials began during training at the police academy. Fortunately for her, Laurie wasn't the only female representative there. It was there she met Judy Zess, who became her close friend. Quite naturally, the girls grew close, actively communicated, and provided each other with support. Even during the training process, Laurie demonstrated results that were impressive even compared to some male cadets. Her physical fitness, strength, and endurance allowed her to meet standards on par with the guys, and sometimes surpass them. Obtaining the diploma didn't present particular difficulties for her. The year 1980 became significant. Laurie received an appointment to the Milwaukee Police Department. That's when the real trials began, ones she hadn't had to deal with before. Male colleagues demonstrated open resistance, categorically refusing to recognize her as part of the team. In the male environment, the girl was viewed as an unnecessary burden. Laurie's strong character didn't allow them to break her. Most likely, this provoked even greater hostility from their side. Instead of collegial support, she faced harassment and even sexual advances. From her service colleagues, the girl regularly received veiled threats. Every minor mistake became a reason for mockery and provoked conflict situations. The result was the formation of a toxic work environment. Judy, her friend, also successfully completed training and received a position in the law enforcement system. This further strengthened their friendship, as both faced similar challenges. The girls maintained close contact, visited movie theaters and various events together. Such communication provided necessary emotional release. They discussed service problems and understood each other perfectly. While Laurie dealt with stress in traditional ways, Judy sometimes resorted to smoking marijuana to relieve tension. Once, Judy was caught while using the substance. She was in Laurie's company, who, however, didn't participate in the smoking. Judy was immediately detained and subsequently dismissed from the police force. For a long time, Laurie was considered as a possible accomplice, although toxicological analysis confirmed the absence of any prohibited substances in her system. Despite this, police leadership continued to look for grounds for accusations. Eventually, Laurie was found guilty of complicity in Judy's offense because she hadn't reported the incident to management. After this, the psychological pressure at work significantly intensified. Colleagues unanimously believed that Laurie should resign. The nitpicking became even more unbearable, everyone was looking for a reason for her dismissal. Finally, in August 1980, she was removed from service in law enforcement and placed on a blacklist, which significantly complicated further employment. Laurie felt strong indignation about this entire situation. The formal reason for dismissal was complicity in an offense, but she was convinced that the real reason was prejudice treatment. Management simply wanted to get rid of her, using the first opportunity that came along. The feeling of betrayal prompted her to fight for the restoration of justice. She remembered her father's stories about the corrupt system and injustice and concluded that she herself had become another victim. During the summer season, the police department regularly organized informal gatherings. Employees arranged get-togethers outdoors or in public locations, consumed alcohol, and sometimes behavior went beyond the bounds of decency. This was exactly the situation that developed in the summer of 1980 during a large-scale picnic in the city park. There was plenty of alcoholic beverages. At the height of the festivities, police officers stripped off their clothes and in an indecent state began dancing on tables, as well as entering into intimate relations with representatives of the oldest profession. Because everything took place in a public space, numerous citizens became witnesses. Compromising photographs were taken. Learning about these events, Laurie felt deep indignation. In her opinion, such behavior deserved much harsher punishment than the episode with her friend smoking marijuana. Her irritation was completely understandable. After all, she had been deprived of work for something over which she had no control and in which she didn't participate. Laurie sought the restoration of justice. She managed to obtain photographs from those scandalous parties. She personally verified that her former colleagues without any hesitation danced naked on tables in a public space. It also turned out that no disciplinary measures were taken after the incident. All officers who participated in these indecent acts continued their service. The double standards that prevailed in the police system at the time deeply affected the girl. She decided to send several compromising photographs to the police committee. Additionally, she initiated a lawsuit, qualifying the situation as discrimination. Besides the desire for justice, Laurie hoped to be reinstated in service, as she had invested significant efforts and time in obtaining professional education. She was confident that she deserved a place in the police ranks. However, the case, begun with great hopes, gradually lost momentum. Not a single participant in the naked dancing ever received punishment. During that period, Laurie and Judy were renting a tiny apartment together. The loss of work created serious financial difficulties, even paying for such modest housing became a problem. The girls blamed the Milwaukee Police Department administration for their material hardships. Bank accounts rapidly emptied, and they found themselves in a hopeless situation. Thanks to her attractive appearance, Laurie received an offer of employment at the Playboy Club. Being in a desperate situation, she accepted this offer. Previously, Laurie had never considered the possibility of such work, but it opened a path to paying off debt obligations and obtaining decent income. The establishment where she was to work was located approximately 60 minutes by car from Milwaukee and was an elite private restaurant oriented toward a wealthy male audience. Laurie planned to limit herself exclusively to serving guests, serving food and drinks. The establishment staff consisted of beautiful girls dressed in revealing waitress costumes. Judy couldn't get this position due to insufficient attractiveness compared to Laurie. Instead, the main heroine of our story managed to successfully find employment. The main income was formed through generous tips. The financial crisis was overcome, although this turned out to be a temporary solution. Such work never brought Laurie satisfaction, and discomfort appeared from the first working days. Over time, she began to encounter rude treatment from the establishment's visitors. Men showed persistence and made indecent proposals. Laurie no longer wished to continue this activity, but the significant earnings kept her in place. The circumstances took on a threatening character when, after finishing one of her work shifts, the girl discovered a dead rodent on the hood of her car. She perceived this as an unambiguous signal of intimidation. It's worth noting that the establishment had a respectable reputation. Previously, Laurie had never noticed the presence of rats in this place. The girl formed a firm conviction that the animal had been planted intentionally in connection with her attempts to achieve fair consideration in police structures. Someone among those who were threatened with troubles due to her appeal to the committee decided to apply psychological pressure tactics. This person established surveillance and found out her place of work. However, instead of the expected fear, Laurie felt a wave of indignation, which only strengthened her determination to defend women's rights, including their place in the law enforcement system. Laurie's period of work as a waitress in this establishment lasted approximately 30 days, after which she reached the limit of psychological endurance and submitted documents for resignation. The money earned during this term proved sufficient to pay off accumulated debt obligations and make rent payments. However, the question of stable financial security remained open, which forced her to accept a temporary offer to work as an instructor at a sports club. A chance coincidence led to Laurie meeting a man named Alfred Schultz. This man was decades older than her and, what's especially important, worked in the same police unit where she and her friend had previously served. Moreover, Alfred had participated in those same scandalous celebrations with nudity, which Laurie didn't suspect at the time. For his part, there was also no information about Laurie's complaint about police actions, and he felt no animosity toward her. Romantic feelings sparked between them. The state of being in love didn't allow Laurie to notice the problematic aspects of Alfred's character. He had a reputation as an incorrigible womanizer. His previous marriage to Christine Schultz ended in divorce after the wife learned about her husband's numerous marital infidelities. From this union, Alfred had 2 sons. The man possessed considerable skill in seducing women and quite quickly won Laurie's favor. When he proposed marriage, the girl agreed. The wedding ceremony took place in January 1981 in Illinois, just 3 months after Alfred's official divorce from his previous marriage. However, Wisconsin state law, where the couple lived, required a much longer waiting period. It was necessary to wait approximately 6 months between divorce and a new marriage, which is why their union was declared invalid. The couple had to reformalize their marital relations according to requirements. After this, Alfred moved into the modest apartment that Laurie rented together with Judy and her partner. Christine, Alfred's ex-wife, continued to live with their 2 sons in the house that had previously been their shared home. The man found himself in a difficult situation due to housing and financial problems. He was obligated to pay alimony to his ex-wife and children, which he regularly complained about to his new wife and her friend. In the darkness of night on May 28, 1981, the 11-year-old older son of Christine and Alfred woke up to unusual sounds. Before him stood the figure of an unknown man who was trying to tie him up. The boy managed to see that the attacker was wearing gloves, dressed in a green tracksuit, his face was hidden by a ski mask, and red hair was gathered in a ponytail. Gripped by panic, the schoolboy began to scream loudly, which forced the intruder to retreat. During his escape, the attacker shouted threatening words. Running into his mother's bedroom, the child saw Christine on the bed in a helpless state. The woman was tied up, her mouth taped shut. She had a gunshot wound to the chest. The 11-year-old boy called for medical help and police. Unfortunately, emergency services arrived too late. Christine had received a fatal gunshot wound from a pistol. The bullet hit the heart muscle, and the woman died from blood loss before medics arrived. At the time of death, the mother of 2 children was 30 years old. No child who was in the house with their mother suffered physical harm. Forensic experts immediately began a detailed examination of the premises and surrounding area. No signs of forced entry were found, property remained untouched. This didn't cause particular surprise, as at that time residents of private homes in safe neighborhoods often didn't lock their front doors. However, Christine's children claimed that their family always followed security measures and locked doors, so they suggested the intruder had a key. It was logical to assume the criminal was acquainted with the family. Alfred Schultz was informed about the tragic event. A service colleague picked him up by car from the apartment and delivered him to the former family home. Seeing the body of his deceased ex-wife, Alfred categorically denied his involvement in the crime. Then, accompanied by the same colleague, he returned to the apartment where he lived with Laurie and Judy. In the apartment, Alfred demonstrated his service weapon, a revolver. His service colleague somehow established that the weapon hadn't been used recently. It's important to note that no expert examinations were conducted during this, but after such a superficial inspection, suspicions regarding Alfred were dismissed, and he ceased to be considered as a potential suspect. Subsequently, Alfred's revolver was still sent for ballistic examination, the results of which testified that this exact weapon was used to kill Christine. Paradoxically, after receiving these results, investigators didn't return to considering Alfred as the main suspect. Instead, law enforcement focused on Laurie Bembenek. According to the detective's version, Laurie might have had personal motives of animosity toward Christine, connected with dissatisfaction with the monthly alimony payments of $700. Additionally, she had access to the weapon and keys to Christine's home, which Alfred had secretly made by copying his older son's key. This gave the girl the opportunity to enter the house unimpeded. Laurie decisively rejected the proposed assumptions. According to her words, that evening she went to sleep earlier than usual, since Alfred was on duty service. Judy also went to bed early. No witnesses who could confirm these statements were found. The older son of the deceased provided a description of what he saw in the house, a male figure in green sportswear and black shoes, with red hair gathered in a ponytail. Laurie had none of these items, her hair was light-colored. However, several days after the investigation began, the situation took an unexpected development. Problems with the sewage system arose in the dwelling. Arriving on call, the plumber pulled a red wig from the toilet drain. Laurie claimed she was seeing this item for the first time and had no idea about its origin. Soon police conducted a search of the apartment where the main suspect lived. During the search, a green tracksuit was found that matched the characteristics of the clothing the criminal wore in Christine's house. 3 weeks after the tragedy, on June 24, 1981, Laurie Bembenek was detained on suspicion of murdering Christine Schultz. From the first moment, the girl claimed there was a conspiracy by police officers who sought to take revenge on her, but the inability to provide an alibi only complicated her situation. A critical factor was her refusal to take a polygraph test. She justified this decision by her experience serving in law enforcement, when she repeatedly observed the unreliability of such testing results. Additionally, the girl expressed concerns about possible falsification of results. At that time in the state, polygraph test results weren't considered weighty evidence for establishing guilt. Thus, Laurie's decision was logical and justified. However, no one listened to her arguments. At that time, Laurie was employed in the security service of the Milwaukee University campus. During the search of her personal locker, a comb was seized for forensic examination. Subsequent research established the identity of hair from the comb and hair found at the crime scene. Based on this data, detectives concluded there were sufficient grounds for bringing official charges. The court hearing in the case of first-degree murder of Christine Schultz was scheduled for February 1982. Before the trial began, the girl remained at home, awaiting trial. The case gained wide publicity. Mass media actively covered every aspect. Laurie continued to maintain her innocence, but reality turned out to be less interesting than journalistic speculation. On the wave of media attention, she turned into a real celebrity. Every step she took, every statement became the subject of newspaper headlines. She was even given the nickname Bambi, a shortened version of her surname, which she found unpleasant. On the eve of the court hearing, a key witness appeared, Judy. The former best friend was to testify against Laurie. By that time, their friendship had already ended. Relations became extremely tense. The exact reasons for the conflict remain unknown, but the quarrel arose on the grounds of dismissal from the law enforcement system. Judy provided testimony against Laurie, claiming that she felt hatred toward Christine. According to her words, her friend had repeatedly expressed threats against the victim. Additionally, the roommate stated that Laurie had a red wig, purchased shortly before the crime was committed. Numerous inconsistencies were observed in Judy's testimony, especially regarding the chronology of events. However, proper attention wasn't paid to these discrepancies. A notable fact is that Alfred, shortly before the trial began, also broke off relations with Laurie, stopped supporting her, and testified against her. It later became known that at that time he was already living with another woman. During the court hearing, he stated that on the night the crime was committed, he was not on duty but was drinking alcohol in a bar, which already created contradictions in his testimony. Additionally, information was revealed that Alfred had previously been involved in the accidental killing of another police officer. After a lengthy investigation, all charges against him were dropped. Additional persons who appeared as witnesses for the prosecution testified that Laurie had repeatedly discussed the issue of killing Christine, and had even approached one of them with an offer of financial reward for committing the crime. Witnesses reported that the accused had green sportswear that matched the description provided by the victim's son. Additionally, she possessed rope made from underwear fabric, similar to that which restricted the victim's movement. The characteristics of the wig matched the fibrous particles found at the crime scene. A store employee testified to the fact that Laurie purchased such a wig in the period preceding the tragic events. The prosecution presented Laurie to the court as a person of frivolous behavior with an excessive inclination toward a luxurious lifestyle, who desired Christine's death in order to free her new husband from the burden of alimony obligations to the children, which would allow the couple to settle in more comfortable housing, the house that Alfred had transferred for his wife and children's use. The defense refuted the proposed motive, pointing out that under such a scenario, Laurie as a young woman would have to take on the responsibilities of raising someone else's children, which clearly wasn't in her interests. The accused consistently maintained the position that the entire case was an act of retaliation from the Milwaukee Police Department leadership for her attempts to hold former employees accountable for indecent behavior during naked celebrations, and the real organizer of the crime was Alfred, who hired a killer and provided him with keys to his ex-wife's home. In her conviction, it was Alfred who had weighty reasons to seek the return of the house, custody of the children, and freedom from financial obligations. He could achieve all of this through Christine's elimination. Despite determined attempts to defend her position, on March 9, 1982, 22-year-old Laurie Bembenek was found guilty by the court of committing first-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. 1984 became the year of divorce between Laurie and Alfred. The convicted woman's claims weren't believed, with the exception of her lawyer, who made efforts to search for possibilities of her release from prison. The girl decided to use her imprisonment time beneficially and began studying legal sciences behind bars. In parallel, Laurie created artistic illustrations for the penitentiary press. Thanks to the support of numerous sympathizers, through the mediation of one of her cellmates, she became acquainted with her brother, named Dominic Gugliato. Romantic feelings arose between them, which led to the beginning of correspondence. After 8 years of imprisonment, on July 15, 1990, Laurie successfully escaped from the correctional facility. She managed to squeeze through a small window opening in the laundry room, after which she overcame a barbed wire fence. Dominic was waiting for her outside the perimeter and evacuated the escapee by car. They subsequently crossed the Canadian border. Laurie managed to avoid detection, despite active search measures. Search efforts weren't directed at finding the couple, who presented themselves as married. At that time, one of the facility's inmates, Freddie Hohenberger, revealed to his cellmate information that he was the one who had carried out Christine's murder on Alfred's order, with whom he maintained long-standing connections. However, Freddie categorically refused to publicly admit his participation in the crime. Subsequently, Laurie's former companion and roommate, Judy, annulled her court testimony. She explained that she had given testimony under pressure from law enforcement and didn't believe Laurie was involved in the crime. Additionally, information was revealed about providing Laurie's ex-husband, Alfred, with immunity guarantees from criminal prosecution as compensation for the testimony he provided in court. It became known that the sewage system where the wig was found was connected to another resident's apartment. The neighbor reported that Judy had asked her for permission to use the bathroom. It was after this visit that the problem with the pipe blockage arose. Judy confirmed the fact of owning a similar red wig, denying its presence with Laurie. All these circumstances created the impression of a deliberate conspiracy against Laurie. The woman's escape from the correctional facility received wide media coverage. New information about her possible innocence led to the formation of a significant support group. Supporters even made and wore T-shirts with the slogan, "Run, Bambi, Run." An association in support of Laurie was formed, which systematically organized gatherings, accumulated financial resources to pay for private detectives and lawyers' services, and tracked the development of the case. Movement participants were convinced of the injustice of the girl's imprisonment for a crime to which she had no connection. At that point, numerous procedural violations in the investigation were revealed. In particular, the wig as material evidence couldn't be considered indisputable testimony. Its prolonged presence in the sewage system could have led to significant contamination. The seller's testimony regarding the fact of the wig's sale was also subjected to reasonable doubts. The key prosecution witness Judy lost credibility due to the conflict situation between the girls on the eve of events, and her subsequent recantation of testimony finally destroyed the evidence base against Laurie. During the investigation, significant attention was paid to the testimony of Christine's older son, Sean, the direct eyewitness to the crime. However, the boy insisted that he had observed a male figure whose physical parameters were radically different from Laurie's. The child remembered a low, rumbling male voice. Over the years, having reached maturity, he repeatedly gave interviews to journalists, consistently claiming the impossibility of confusing the attacker with a woman. Like other facts inconvenient for the investigation, this testimony was systematically ignored. Immediately after Laurie's escape with Bembenek, they settled near the Canadian border in the town of Thunder Bay, Ontario Province. The couple's financial resources were exhausted, and Bembenek's romantic ideas about free life quickly dissipated. The man was overcome with despair and depression, he lost the will to act, so Laurie had to take the initiative. She found a job as a waitress in a restaurant establishment, used the pseudonym Jennifer Gazana, changed her hair color, but the earnings were catastrophically insufficient. Bembenek refused employment, instead spending the last money on purchasing fishing and hunting equipment, spending leisure time in nature with new acquaintances. Laurie demonstrated resilience and maintained optimism about the future. She got additional work as an instructor at a sports center. Despite all precautionary measures, her identity was established after a television program about America's most wanted criminals. Recognition occurred through a report from one of the restaurant's customers where Laurie worked. On October 17, 1990, the couple was detained. The escapee's partner received 3.5 months of imprisonment after extradition for aiding escape. After this, his interest in Laurie faded, and he disappeared without a trace. During this period, Laurie made maximum efforts to obtain the right to remain on Canadian territory. She positioned herself as a person who had suffered political persecution and discrimination. Successful completion of a polygraph test confirmed her claims of innocence. The American side insisted on extradition. Thanks to the young woman's active position, Canadian authorities agreed to extradition only on the condition of conducting a new trial. The subsequent investigation revealed numerous serious oversights by Milwaukee police during the investigation of Christine's murder, but the case progressed with great reluctance. The defense assessed the prospects for acquittal as minimal. At the same time, the prosecution didn't have a convincing evidence base, apart from testimony. On December 9, 1992, Laurie entered into a plea agreement with the prosecution under special conditions. She gave up challenging the charges. In return the sentence was reduced to 20 years with the possibility of early release. Taking into account the time already served, conditional early release occurred directly in the courtroom. For the next decade, Laurie had to comply with strict conditions, regularly appearing before a supervisory officer during the probationary period to avoid re-imprisonment. From now on, Laurie could live legally, but prolonged imprisonment left irreversible consequences. Her appearance underwent negative changes, her former beauty was lost forever. Doctors diagnosed post-traumatic stress disorder. The woman tried to drown out problems with alcohol, which led to the formation of addiction. Suicidal thoughts repeatedly arose due to the collapse of all life plans. Having accumulated debts to lawyers in the amount of over $2 million, she initiated bankruptcy proceedings. All the vicissitudes received wide media coverage. Laurie was regularly invited to participate in television shows, literary works were created about her fate. She personally wrote an autobiographical book titled Woman on the Run. Using her popularity, Laurie began selling her own artistic works, founded a gallery, but fortune turned away again. A fire destroyed almost the entire collection of works. She was convinced it was deliberate arson by vengeful law enforcement officers. Employment was complicated due to general recognizability. Laurie decided to move to Vancouver, where her parents lived. August 2002 marked the end of Laurie Bembenek's probationary period. She initiated a court petition to conduct DNA analysis of material evidence used against her. The list included Christine Schultz's bloody bedding, the bullet removed from the body, clothing items, and red wig fibers. Funding such an examination required significant investments, which she didn't have. It was then that Laurie received an offer from a television program that specialized in investigating criminal cases. In October 2002, she was invited to participate with a promise to finance the expensive DNA analysis worth approximately $20,000. The producers were particularly interested in re-examining the bullet. The condition was to compare all DNA profiles with Laurie's biological material. At that time, she was 44 years old. During filming, she was placed in a separate residence with security provided due to increased media attention to the famous criminal. However, she felt a sense of repeated imprisonment, which gave rise to a desire to escape. At a certain moment, Laurie was overcome by a panic attack, which led to jumping from the apartment window. The fall turned out to be unsuccessful, the leg suffered such a serious fracture that amputation below the knee joint had to be performed. The program's filming was cancelled. Due to the injury received, Laurie initiated a lawsuit against the television program for unlawful detention, but the lawsuit was rejected. In parallel, she tried to prove her non-involvement in Christine's murder. Since she had previously agreed not to challenge the verdict, her petition was also rejected. Lawyers tried to help by filing an appeal with information about newly discovered evidence hidden during the original trial. In particular, ballistic examination results indicated that the bullets didn't match Alfred's weapon. Male DNA was found on Christine's body, indicating sexual assault. Christine's older son continued to claim he didn't believe in Laurie's involvement, since he had seen a man at the crime scene. All these facts indicated Laurie's non-involvement in the murder, but the appeal was also rejected. In Vancouver, Laurie met forestry worker Marty Carson. They married in 2005. Laurie's fate, which went downhill after employment in the police, ended tragically. Death occurred on November 20, 2010, at the age of 52. Shortly before this, doctors diagnosed hepatitis. The immediate cause of death was kidney and liver failure. Until the last moment of life, she maintained her innocence. Please write your thoughts and reactions in the comments below. For those who are new here, subscribing is the best way to stay updated on future content. Also give a like please. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Thank you for your support during this difficult time. Until next time, friends.